Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're cracking open the power of habit, why we do what we do in life and business, written by Charles Duhigg.
It's a really fascinating exploration into how, I guess, how these patterns, these habits, the ones we don't always realize, shape our lives.
Yeah.
Duhigg, he kind of guides us through this whole landscape of habits.
It's a complex one, too.
Yeah, it is, with 9 chapters.
9 chapters.
Each one kind of offers a different way of looking at habits, a unique lens, I'd say.
Okay, 9 chapters. It sounds like a journey. We're going to need a map.
I like that, a map. Yeah, so think of it this way. Chapter 1, the habit loop, is the starting point. We uncover the neurology behind how habits are actually formed. And there's this really captivating case study, you'll love this one, about this man. He lost his memory but kept his habits.
Oh, wow.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Then, chapter 2, that's the craving brain. It reveals how companies, big names like Pepsodent and Febreze, they tapped into the science of craving. Like, seriously, they made their products, irresistible. Turn them into habits.
Sounds like a marketing dream. Or a nightmare, depending how you look at it.
You got it. Then we move on to chapter 3, the golden rule of habit change. This one's practical, a guide to transforming bad habits into good ones.
Okay, that's the one everyone wants to know about.
Right, and he uses these really interesting examples like Alcoholics Anonymous and even an NFL coach.
Oh, wow. So it applies to, like, everything, not just individual habits.
You're catching on. Chapter 4, that's where we learn about keystone habits, or another way to call them, the power of small wins. We'll see how focusing on just one key habit can change, everything, just like it did for Alcoa, that big aluminum company. And then Chapter 5 tackles willpower.
Oh, willpower. Always the tricky one.
Yeah, it's definitely misunderstood. This chapter debunks some myths about it and shows us how to actually train willpower, strengthen it,
Like a muscle, they say.
Exactly.
I'm sensing a theme here. Understanding habits isn't just about ditching the bad ones. It's almost like we're learning how to use them, harness them.
Absolutely. You're totally right. It's about positive change.
So what about the rest of the chapters? What's waiting for us?
Chapter 6. That one dives into the power of a crisis. It's how crises can actually be opportunities, like to reshape those organizational habits, and how leaders can use this to their advantage. Some really good examples there. And then get ready for this one. Chapter 7. How Target knows what you want before you do.
Oh, yeah, that one. Everyone's talking about that one, the one that's a little bit, creepy.
You know it. We'll uncover their secrets, how they predict customer behavior. Using data and shopping habits, it's amazing. Then we move on to Chapter 8, Saddleback Church and the Montgomery bus boycott. Sounds like an odd pair, right?
A little bit.
But it's about social habits, how they fuel movements, and even, shape communities.
Interesting. Okay, so less like self-help, more like a sociology lesson.
Yeah, you could say that. And finally, Chapter 9, the neurology of free will is where things get, deep.
Okay, brace ourselves.
We'll explore this thought-provoking case study. It challenges what we think about free will and habit, leaves us with a lot to think about, about like the brain, our choices.
That's an intense lineup. Okay, let's start with chapter 1, that habit loop. We've got to unpack that. You mentioned the man who lost his memory but kept his habits. What's that all about?
Yeah. So picture this. You wake up one day and you don't recognize your own house, your family, anything. That's what happened to Eugene. His brain was, attacked by a virus.
Oh, wow.
He couldn't make new memories, but he could still do things like getting dressed, making breakfast, those habits.
Oh, even without remembering, those habits were just happening.
Yeah. It's incredible. It shows just how powerful the habit loop is. Duhigg breaks it down into 3 parts: a cue, a routine, and a reward. Like a loop in your brain.
So a cue, that's like the trigger.
Right. It triggers the routine, and then you get the reward for doing it.
Oh.
Over time, it becomes so automatic you don't even think about it.
Like brushing your teeth. You just do.
Yeah, exactly. And it all happens in the basal ganglia part of your brain.
I've heard of that.
It's like the brain's autopilot.
The autopilot. Okay. So Eugene, even without his memories, his basal ganglia was still working.
Yeah, driving those habits. It's fascinating. And a little, unsettling.
Yeah. It's like how much of what we do is just habit, things we don't even think about.
That's the power of them. The danger, too. They free up our minds for other things, but they can also lead to, mindless behavior. Harmful stuff if we're not paying attention.
So understanding this loop, it's the first step to taking control, right?
Absolutely. And that takes us to Chapter 2, the craving brain. We get into how companies use this knowledge to make products we can't resist.
I think we all know that feeling. Tell me about those marketing masterminds.
Okay, so Pepsodent. Back in the early 1900s, toothbrushing wasn't exactly popular.
No, I can imagine.
But how did Pepsodent become so huge? They didn't focus on clean teeth. They focused on, well, on a craving.
A craving to brush your teeth. What's that, like craving smooth teeth?
That's it. They found that people craved that feeling of smooth teeth. So they marketed Pepsodent as the solution to the film on your teeth.
Oh, I remember that.
Right. And it wasn't even really, well, a bad thing. But it gave them a cue. They told people, just run your tongue across your teeth. You'll feel it.
Oh, so sneaky.
Right. They made people hyper aware of it. And then, boom, Pepsodent was the answer.
Wow. So they created the problem and the solution.
That's marketing genius, right?
Right.
They triggered that craving for smooth teeth, and toothbrushing became, well, an obsession. And it's not just Pepsodent either. Febreze, they struggled at first.
But they?
Yeah. They
Okay.
were an odor eliminator, but people didn't really notice the smells, the bad ones.
Interesting.
So they changed things up. They marketed Febreze as a product that made things smell fresh, but after you cleaned, and it worked. They tapped into that craving for a nice scent. Sales went through the roof.
Wow. It's like they're like hacking our brains, making us crave things we didn't even know we wanted.
It's true. It's powerful stuff. This knowledge, you can use it for good or for, well, manipulation.
It's a double-edged sword.
Exactly. Companies are figuring out how to trigger those cravings, turn them into routines that make them money.
At least the money. Yeah.
But we can use those same principles to promote healthy habits.
Oh, yeah. Like if we understand how cravings work,
we can make better choices.
Okay, so then the question is, how do we break free from those bad habits, the ones we've been tricked into?
Right. That's the heart of Chapter 3, the golden rule of habit change, the key. You don't eliminate a habit, you change it, you transform it.
So not about, like, willpower, just trying to stop.
Willpower is important, but it's not the whole story. Duhigg says the best way to change a habit is to keep the cue and the reward. But you change the routine. He uses Alcoholics Anonymous as an example. They don't try to eliminate the urge to drink, but they help people figure out what triggers it.
Yeah.
And then replace the drinking routine with something new, like meetings, connecting with a sponsor.
Okay, so the cue stays the same.
Right. Stress, loneliness, whatever it is. But the routine and the reward, they change to something healthier.
So clever.
Right. It's like rerouting those pathways in the brain instead of trying to shut them down completely.
Makes sense. Are there any other examples of this?
Yeah, a great one is Tony Dungy. He was an NFL coach. He turned a losing team into champions using this principle.
Wow.
He realized his players were making bad choices on the field because of, years of bad habits.
Trained habits.
Yeah. But instead of yelling at them, he focused on changing their reactions, their automatic ones. He used drills, specific playbooks.
So he gave them a new routine.
Exactly. But the cue, the game situation, and the reward, a successful play, they stayed the same. And the team, they totally turned around.
That's incredible. So it's like it's understanding the mechanics of the habit and then finding a way to redirect it,
Yeah, a better outcome.
That's powerful. Okay, so we've got the habit loop, the cravings. We know they can be manipulated. And we've got a way to change those routines. What's next on our habit hacking journey?
Next up, Chapter 4. That's where we dive into keystone habits, or the power of small wins. It's about how one key habit, just one, can change your whole life, like finding the keystone that holds the whole thing together.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. What kind of keystone magic are we talking about?
Okay, imagine a company. They're struggling with worker safety. The CEO, Paul O'Neill, his top priority, not profits, worker safety.
Unusual.
Right. He understood that this one habit, this keystone habit, would force them to change everything. Communication, teamwork, efficiency.
Everything.
And it worked. Alcoa, they became one of the safest companies, and their profits soared.
So one change, one small change, and it changed the whole company culture.
Yeah, and it's not just companies either. Research shows that keystone habits, things like regular exercise, can have these ripple effects on your diet, your sleep, even your mood, your relationships, everything.
So we're not just understanding habits, we're unlocking, like, superpowers.
You could say that. And just like with superpowers, there's a key ingredient. Willpower. That's where Chapter 5 comes in, debunking myths and showing us how to train willpower, like you said, like a muscle.
Okay, I'm ready. This willpower thing, it's always a mystery to me.
We always hear it's about grit, determination, right?
Yeah.
But research shows it's actually a limited resource, like it gets depleted, like physical energy.
Oh, that's why it's so hard to resist, like a cookie when you're tired.
Exactly. It's not about having more willpower, it's about using it strategically.
So how do we do that?
One way is to plan ahead. Anticipate those challenges, make a plan. There was a study where people who planned how they'd handle temptation, like craving a snack, they were way more successful.
Oh, so it's like having a backup plan.
Exactly. A pre-programmed response for when your willpower is low.
You're not making decisions on the fly when you're already tired.
Right. That's what Starbucks did with their employee training.
Oh, interesting.
They knew their baristas. They faced so many challenging situations, angry customers all day. It drains their willpower.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
So they created routines for handling those common situations. They were pre-programmed responses so employees could save their willpower for the really tough stuff. Led to better service, less stress.
Like giving your brain a cheat sheet, how to deal with a difficult customer.
Exactly. And it shows what Duhigg's book is all about. Understanding habits allows us to become more aware of our behavior, how we act as individuals and as groups.
We're not just like robots running on autopilot.
Right. Habits are powerful, but we can reprogram the system.
Okay, I'm feeling empowered, like I'm peeking behind the curtain of my own brain.
Yeah, that's great. So where we go from here on this this habit hacking adventure, what are some of the surprises waiting for us?
Well, buckle up because Chapter 6, The Power of a Crisis, takes us to some intense places.
Okay, intense, I'm curious, but a little nervous.
I get it. It's kind of strange, but Duhigg says crises can actually be good things.
Good things.
Yeah, like opportunities for change,
Okay, how so?
So think about it this way. Imagine a snow globe, when it's still, everything settles.
Oh.
But shake it up, everything's in motion. Crises are like that. They disrupt everything, our routines, everything.
So like a force reset.
Right. And that makes us, more open to change.
That's true, but how do we actually use that disruption, make it good?
That's where the examples come in. Remember Paul O'Neill, the CEO from Alcoa, the worker safety guy?
Yeah.
That decision, it was a mini crisis, It challenged everything, the power structures, everything. Everyone had to adapt.
And it worked?
Yeah, safety improved, but also profits went up, way up. So sometimes you need to shake things up to get real change, lasting change.
Exactly. There's another example, too, the King's Crossfire in the London Underground back in '87. Awful, but it showed how rigid habits in organizations can be dangerous.
Dangerous.
Yeah. They hindered communication, problem solving, everything. The crisis, it forced them to change, overhaul safety, become more flexible.
Well, that's sad, but it makes you think sometimes it takes a tragedy to see those flaws, the flaws in how we do things and to change those habits.
It's true. But there's hope, too, Even those deep-rooted habits, they can be changed, especially when things are, when the stakes are high.
When it really matters.
Yeah. So the key takeaway is this. Crises create opportunities, windows where change, even big change, is possible. And that leads us right into Chapter 7, how Target knows what you want before you do. It's about how companies, they're using data, not just to understand our habits, but to predict them.
Okay, the chapter everyone's been waiting for, the one that feels a little big brother-ish.
Right. Imagine you're Target. You've got tons of data on your customers, what they buy, when, how much they spend, And you can link that to, their age, income, where they live, everything.
It's like they're building a profile for each shopper.
Yeah. And by looking at all this data, they can see patterns, habits, preferences, all that. Like you always buy diapers and wipes together, right?
It makes sense, yeah.
But how do they go from seeing patterns to predicting behavior? Well, think about pregnancy. It changes everything, right?
Yeah.
New purchases, tons of them. Target realized they could identify pregnant women really early, sometimes even before the women themselves knew.
Hold on, really? How is that even possible?
They noticed that women in early pregnancy, they tend to buy certain things like unscented lotion, vitamins, lots of cotton balls. Weird, right?
Yeah.
By tracking those purchases, they could predict who was likely pregnant.
So then they send them, like, baby ads.
Exactly. It's impressive, but also a little creepy.
It is. Kind of feels like they're reading our minds.
Right. It raises questions about privacy, is it ethical? But it also shows how powerful data is. If they can predict our behavior, what does that mean for our freedom to choose?
It's almost like they're nudging us in certain directions without us even knowing.
Yeah. So how does this all tie in, social influence to habit formation? That's chapter 8, Saddleback Church and the Montgomery Bus Boycott.
Okay, that's an interesting pair.
Yeah. Duhigg connects these two to show the power of social habits, how they drive these big movements, shape communities.
I'm listening.
Okay, so the bus boycott, right, a huge moment. But it wasn't just Rosa Parks. It needed those social habits to work.
What do you mean?
The organizers, they understood. In a tight community, those social norms, they're powerful.
Like unspoken rules?
Yeah. They made participating in the boycott not just the right thing to do, morally, but the expected thing.
Socially?
You boycotted because your friends did, your family, your neighbors, everyone. It was the norm. And if you didn't, well, there were consequences.
So it's like peer pressure, but for, like, a huge cause.
Exactly. They used those social dynamics to make individual actions, well, bigger.
I get it. It's amazing how they use that to create change.
And it's not just movements either. Duhigg talks about Saddleback Church, this mega church in California. The pastor, Rick Warren, he knew to build a community, he needed social habits. Habits that got people involved, connected.
So it wasn't just about showing up on Sunday.
Right. He created these small groups. They met outside of church. They built friendships, accountability, shared purpose.
So people felt like they belonged, like they were part of something.
Yeah. They were more likely to go to church, participate, because they knew their group was counting on them.
Smart. It's like a
Yeah.
built-in support system.
Right. So the key takeaway is social habits, they're powerful. We're influenced by the people around us, the norms of our groups. Understanding this, it can help us create environments that support good habits, in our families, at work, everywhere.
It's like we're not just individuals making choices, right? We're influenced by all these social forces.
Absolutely. Which takes us to the final chapter, chapter 9, the neurology of free will. This is where things get, philosophical. Duhigg questions the idea of free will. He says our habits, even the ones we don't realize we have, they influence our choices.
Okay, now we're getting deep. So are we just like puppets to our habits, no control?
Not quite, but he's saying our habits, they play a bigger role than we think. He talks about this man, Thomas. He had a brain tumor. It made him do compulsive things like gambling, hypersexuality.
A tumor made him do those things.
Yeah.
So was he responsible?
It's a tough question, right? It makes you think about, responsibility. If our biology can change our choices, how much control do we really have?
Yeah, it's a bit scary to think about.
It's a big question. Philosophers have been debating it for ages. But the chapter also gives us some hope. It talks about William James, a philosopher. He struggled with depression, lack of purpose.
So are we doomed by our biology, our habits?
Not according to James. He believed in habit, but he thought we could shape them consciously to improve our lives. Deliberate practice, choosing our thoughts, our actions. That's how he overcame his struggles.
So we can fight back.
That's what he's saying. We can change, make choices, build better habits.
Okay, that's more like it. We're not stuck then.
Right. One of the most important things from the power of habit, it's not just understanding how they work, it's recognizing we have power, to shape them. We're both the product of our habits and the architect.
We can, rewrite the script.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This has been quite a journey. We've gone from the brain, the habit loop, to cravings, social influence, even free will.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, and it's clear. Habits they're more complex than we think, more influential too.
I'm seeing my own habits differently now. What are some of the key takeaways for you?
For me, I think it's realizing habits, they're not good or bad in themselves. It's more like they're tools, right? And like any tool, you can use them, the wrong way or the right way. It all comes down to, I guess, understanding how they work.
Yeah.
And then making choices, about the habits we want.
The habits we want to have.
Right. And I think Duhigg, he makes a really good point, comparing that bus boycott to pop songs.
Oh, yeah, that was an interesting one.
Yeah. On the surface, they seem totally different, but it's all about social influence.
I'll admit, when I first saw that, I was a bit confused. But the more we talked about it, the more it makes sense.
Think about it. In the boycott, the product, so to speak, was equality, right?
Yeah.
But back then, in a segregated society, that was a tough sell.
Mm.
They had to make it not just, morally right, but like
Mm.
something you wanted to do.
Socially desirable?
Exactly.
A new norm?
It wasn't enough to just convince people individually.
Right. They had to create this collective shift.
And they did it through those social networks.
This started with Rosa Parks, her own community.
Yeah. She wasn't just anyone, right? She was respected, connected to churches, schools, all these groups.
So they used that, her connections.
Yeah, like amplified the message.
And those networks spread it.
Right. It became like a ripple effect.
A ripple effect.
Soon boycotting, it was like a badge of honor.
You did it because everyone else was doing it.
Right. It was what your community was doing.
It's like, I don't know, when a song gets stuck in your head
Yeah.
and you just keep humming it.
It's contagious. It spreads from person to person.
That's the point Duhigg's making, right?
Yeah, that he uses the song Hey Ya by Outkast.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't a sure hit, but the DJs, they started playing it between popular songs.
Oh, sneaky?
Yeah. People were already listening, so they were more likely to stay tuned.
They snuck it in.
Right, under the radar. And the more people heard it, the more familiar it became. And then it was just a catchy song. Everyone was listening to it.
It's like it became popular because it was popular.
Yeah. And it all goes back to, social influence. We're shaped by the people around us, our communities, whether it's buying something, listening to a song, even joining a movement.
Our habits they're influenced by all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It means we're not just like individuals making choices in a vacuum,
Yeah.
We're part of something bigger, and that shapes our habits.
It makes you think, if we understand those social habits, maybe we could use that, for good.
Yeah.
Like create environments that make it easier to have good habits, the healthy ones.
That's the hope, right?
Yeah.
If we can see those cues, the rewards that drive behavior, maybe we can, nudge people toward better choices.
Nudge them in the right direction.
Like design a social architecture
Oh, I like that.
that supports good habits.
That's a really cool way to think about it. It's not just about self-help.
Yeah,
It's about understanding like the whole system.
absolutely. And using that to create, a world where good habits spread, they're contagious.
This whole deep dive, it's been eye-opening, really. I'm
Yeah.
walking away with a new appreciation for habits,
Mm.
both the good and the bad ones,
Mhm.
And I'm feeling inspired. Like, we can use this knowledge to make real change in our lives and even in the world.
I'm so glad. It's a call to action, to be more aware of the habits we're feeding, be more intentional about the routines we create,
Yeah.
and to think about how our habits, they contribute to the bigger picture.
Well said. Before we go, I want to hear from you. What resonated with you from this deep dive into the power of habit? Share your thoughts in the comments. And tell us what book you want us to explore next. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our future deep dives.